There we go. We are now recording. If you don't want to be on the recording, feel free to put your screen to non-video, and you don't have to be on there. And I'll go ahead and share screen here. Let me see if I can get this PowerPoint on up. Ooh, this is tricky. Okay, hold on one sec. You're all in the way of me controlling it, so hold on a second. There we go. You all probably see a spinning icon. There we are. Okay, so you're in the right place. This is the information you're interested in. And I just wanted to take a moment to introduce our leads. You'll be hearing from everybody this evening, and they'll reintroduce themselves when they hop in. So our animal search and rescue co-leads are Nancy Curson, Alan Harrison, and Mike Curson. And our assistant leads, Jen Borgen, Lisa Stewart, Michelle Badker, Mike Repetto, and Michelle Harrison. Alan, as you know, is transportation lead. And this amazing team has come together and put this slideshow together. And as many of you had the opportunity to work with this team last year, it's an amazing team. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to them.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy Curson, and I'm one of the ASAR co-leads. So next. Yes, okay. So animal search and rescue sounds really big, but it includes evacuation, shelter in place, and transportation of animals that might be auxiliary, such as taking them to a vet during a disaster when we are activated by the county. We also have a staging center, and a new animal technical rescue team is just starting up right now. We operate in warm zones and unburned mandatory evacuation zones only. We don't send you out into active fire zones. A possible exception would be we might be able to send a couple of teams with a fire department or sheriff escort. Next. Okay, so every single incident we've had, and we've had several so far, they've all been unique, and they've all required us to make little changes to our planned way of doing things. They present different challenges and different response needs. As well, a lot of you are from different carts, which is fantastic. And each one of you will develop your own procedures based on your local conditions, but the basic underlying concepts and procedures are the same. So the whole thing is to learn the basics, understand the foundations, be flexible when you need to be. Okay. Okay, the underlying principles, of course, are always safety first. We're not trying to get anybody killed. We don't want to get anybody hurt. The next is don't self-deploy. Now, what is self-deploying? It's going out claiming that you are acting as Napa cart when you are not. Now, does that mean that if the fire is in your neighborhood and your neighbor needs help that you can't help them? Of course not, but you're acting as a private citizen, not as Napa cart. And don't wear your Napa cart shirt or your vest, and don't put the Napa cart sign on your truck, okay? Know and follow ICS. There's just no getting around just taking those FEMA ICS online courses, because you really need to understand that it really is the foundation of the whole response system. Follow instructions, that's kind of obvious. But you may disagree. If you really feel unsafe that you're being asked to do something that you do not feel is safe, of course, you don't have to do it. Otherwise, we ask that you do what you're told. And if you have a better idea, we want to hear about it later. Okay. Treat teammates respectfully. That's kind of a cliche, but sometimes I think about every single one of us, and there aren't really that many. I mean, 80 something people out of the whole state. We are all here because we are willing to leave the comfort and the air conditioning of our own homes to go out and do something that could be dangerous and certainly involves bad air, wind, heat, and various risks. So I just think it's amazing and deserving of respect. Okay, next. Safety first, always. Your own safety, your teammates' safety, the animal's safety, in that order, and no exceptions. You don't risk your life or anybody else's life for an animal, even though that's why we're there, okay? Next. Now we have some boring protocols before we get to the exciting stuff. General photo policies. When you go out on a call, it really means a lot to an owner to receive a photo where they actually see that their animal is alive and well. So do that, but take it close up. Like these pictures are good examples. They really don't show you much of the background, so you can't really tell how devastated it is or what else might be damaged. Do take photos that illustrate any questions or concerns you might have. Maybe an animal seems sick and you want to check with the vet. Maybe there's some other concern that you think somebody should know about. That's fine. And we always like later on to receive your photos or little video clips that illustrate Napa cart in action, but we will cover the social media rules next. Always be sensitive to the suffering of disaster victims. It's good to feel camaraderie with your teammates, but don't look like it's party time because other people's lives are totally turned upside down. And if you can, always ask for permission to share photos or videos, especially if children are involved. Okay, next. Okay, so the basic rule here is, to quote Mark Zuckerman, who famously failed his own advice, do no harm. You don't want to hurt anything. You don't want to hurt another volunteer. You don't want to hurt a victim. You don't want to armchair quarterback response. I mean, maybe you think the county should be doing a better job, but at least don't say your Napa card if you do that. Facebook is definitely, or Instagram or anything, is definitely not where a person should get bad news. And I read about this a lot after disasters. Well, we learned that our home burned from a picture on Facebook. That's not the way to do it. They need to know that information, but that's not how. Okay. You also don't want to post identifying information like that, where looters would say, oh, I see nobody's home, I'm going to go there. Okay, next. General rules for social media. The underlying principle, of course, is to be kind. And it's very tempting if you think you have a hot scoop, but resist that urge. Run it through our PIO, which is Son and Curson, or our social media specialist, who is Molly Northrup. And just check it out with them. And most of the time they'll say, that's great, go ahead. But, you know, we do ask that you check first. Then there's okay and not okay posts, obviously, in the spirit of not hurting people and not outing people. You don't say that somebody's house was a mess or something like that. Okay. We do always love happy ending stories. The public really needs that good news. They, you know, it just is so nice. This was a cat. that, well, I think a team of our rescuers found, I think, and brought it in. It spent several weeks at the vet. And oh yes, Jamie Ross's Motor was his name. Yeah. In fact, Jamie, I think, and a few other people followed that case until long after the incident was over before it was able to be reunited. Next. The overriding principle is we have to preserve public trust. We may see things that we don't agree with at all. We may see animals that we think are being abused. We may think, illegal things, fighting cocks, ferrets, wolves. We may find a drug lab. Even so, we need for those people to trust us enough, or they're not going to seek help for their animals. So keep it confidential. You're not law enforcement. You're there to evacuate or to provide shelter in place, period. And don't out anybody for something you don't agree with. Don't say, boy, I picked up their horse and it's too thin. No, we don't do that. Luckily, we've never had any trouble with that with Napa cart, but we have experienced it in other areas. So good for you, and that's the rule. Okay, I think at this point, try the next slide. I think it's time for the next person. Yes, Mike Repetto is going to tell you about requirements and training.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Repetto. I'm the assistant lead here at Napa Cart ASAR. So I want to go over exactly what Nancy mentioned, some of the requirements and training for ASAR. Next slide. So first thing is, if you haven't already gone to us, please go to the Napa Cart org website there, download the 2021 volunteer manual. And as Claudia mentioned, our dates are changing. So due to COVID, so please keep alert of those and watch those as upcoming trainings happen. But there you can see, download all the rules and guidelines to be a part of Napa Cart, and which we'll go over here in a few minutes. So next slide. So first step number one is to become a Napa Cart member. You need to do these requirements to be sworn in for Napa County as a DSW or disaster service worker. So the first thing is you need to complete Cert Training, and that's Community Emergency Response Training. It's a 32-hour course, and it's good for 3 years. So that's good to know. And then the FEMA courses minimum requirements are ICS 100 and 200, and both those are done online. And you get certificates from that. From those, you can upload them to and send them Napa Cart, so we have them on file. And then last thing is the attend the annual Napa Cart volunteer training. So next slide. The second requirement is to meet the ASAR requirements is what we're doing right now, which was our annual training. And then Rescue Fast has classes that you need for, which are the all hazard awareness class, also fire line awareness class, and pole line safety classes, which are renewable, which have to be renewed every year. And then, as Alan will cover later on, trailer drivers will need to have driver and vehicle certification, and we'll cover some of the requirements for our driver as well. We do have a May 16th class coming up. We understand that class is full right now, but we also have another class coming up on June 19th. And if you can't make either of those, Alan's email will be included in numerous slides here, and he'll be speaking. You can make special arrangements for him to go over that. A couple other ones is our comms and dispatch, which we have with CERT. We have training on the 15th and the 17th. That's a Thursday and a Saturday. So we have a Zoom as well as a hopefully an in-person meeting there. And then also the livestock assessment handling, which is August 5th through 7th, which I believe has been changed since we actually did the slide. So it's been moved up to July. So next slide. And then just for everyone's information that we anticipate that in 2021, there will be a fitness test required for all cart organizations. The test is going to include a walk of 2 miles flat for 30 minutes wearing a 25-pound pack on the back. So if you haven't done it, start training now. And also just for your note that if you are going to do mutual aid to other carts, this fitness test must be passed in order to go over there. So be aware of that. So everybody start walking now, if you haven't already. Get off those COVID pounds. The next things that are highly recommended we have is to take an animal first aid class. Also, again, on our website, look at some of the Napa cart videos and attend some of the Napa cart animal classes we have. We do like to see people then get rabies pre-exposure vaccination. We understand that it is very expensive if you have private insurance, but for Freedom members at Kaiser and also public health, county health organizations provide that at a very low cost and sometimes free. And then also we encourage you to cross-train with other Napa cart departments and different things. So if you're doing large animal, maybe look at some small shelter things, as well as look at companion animals, and look at what we're going to look at trying to do is to get to have possibly our own ham radio team together. So in case the cart's not available, so practice. And if any of you do want to have a ham radio license, again, please reach out to Alan. He's trying to help get a whole group together for that. Next slide. And then what we talked about was needed on our own. So for the 2 fires we had in incidents we had in 2020, we had the benefit and the loving support of Cert, who did all of our dispatch and comms for us, which we're greatly appreciated for. But we also understand that if a bigger disaster happens, or if something else happens that they get pulled for a different incident, we may be having to do that ourselves. So in this respect, we are looking to develop, have a whole group of people who are ham radio certified and can be our comms person. So again, just like we talked about, so if you have a ham radio license or you're interested in it, please reach out to Alan so we can start building our team for that. So we're looking forward to that for the end of this year and also next year. Next slide. Last thing is, as you know, for those people who are drivers, trailer loading is essential for all animals, whether it's horses, goats, sheep, pigs, whatever it is out there. So we encourage you, if you haven't loaded your animals, train what it's all about. So a lot of our animals are just pasture pets, but we need to have them trained to go into trailers, as well as we need to be familiar with trailers and our own trailers of how to load them. So again, it's training amongst anything else to get everybody to practice in case an incident happens. Next slide. Next thing we have is for small animals. A lot of times we have to go in and rescue a cat or bring a cat home, or smaller animals like a poultry, and they could be a little finicky and hard to get. Our own are pets, and sometimes others were strangers to them. So recommend, you can't really, try practicing on your own cat, but what we do have is the Napa Wildlife Rescue does classes on that. So we ask you to reach out to them at napawildliferescue.org, and request info on some training on that. Next slide.
There's the video.
Okay, next thing you do is, say you're partway through and you don't have an incident happens, please don't just call yourself out. So actually come and help. So come sign up and get a DSW application for the single event. We'll get you a date and time for you to get signed in and sweared in just for this one event. And then we won't send you out alone. If we need you, we will actually pair you up with an experienced person for your first assignment, and you get the feel of what it's all about for being out there. Next slide. And lastly, which Alan will cover a lot more of this in his section, is if you are to be a certified driver and your vehicles, that some of the minimal requirements we have is you have to have a valid driver's license. You must have a current DMV file on record, which you can send to Napa Cart. And then also your vehicles must be currently registered in good running condition. You must have hauler certification that Alan Harrison has. But if you're a Class A license holder, again, that is waived because of you. And then at the beginning of each season, each fire season, each year, and also each event, that a Copy of a pre-inspection form must be submitted and be on file with Napa Cart, and those be sent to Alan at napacart.org, which Alan will cover more in his section. And next, I turn it over to Michelle Backer to talk about activation and on the WhatsApp.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michelle Badker, and I'm an assistant team lead. We're going to talk about activation and WhatsApp. First of all, basically, we're going to talk about the staging center. The staging center is kind of self-explanatory. It's where you come, you check in, and you wait. And unfortunately, this is a lot of hurry up and wait, but it's the nature of the game. So it's a very nice area to, because we do it at the Napa Valley Horsemen's Association, so it's not that terrible. We do the morning briefings there, and that is where you'll also get all of your tools and your supplies, your protective equipment, extra forms, anything that you're going to need. That's where you're going to pick all that stuff up at. So the next slide. So activation, how do we get activated out there? So Napa Cart is actually activated by Napa County. And because not everybody does everything the same way, there's actually various ways that they reach out. The one and the most common one is WhatsApp. You'll also get a Nixle if you're signed up for those. There may be a text, a phone call, an email, even Facebook. So if you're getting things from multiple areas, it's because we need to take as many avenues as we can to make sure we get to as many people so they know what's going on. So. And then WhatsApp. So Napa Cart has two WhatsApps that would be relevant to ASAR. The one is the Napa Cart broadcast list, which is basically everybody that's in Napa Cart. And that would probably be the first avenue that you would, if you're new to Napa Cart and new to ASAR, that's where you would get the notification. Once you're on the ASAR team, you would actually be put on the active ASAR list. And that would be your primary source of getting the incoming messages. And that active ASAR list is the one that we use on a regular basis then throughout the event. So the next slide. So what happens when you get the activation notice? First of all, you're going to respond if you can come, when you're coming, what type of vehicle you have, and if you're bringing a trailer or not. The thing about is the using the WhatsApp and responding to these is that you really want to stick to the information that they're asking. You know, that you can come next week on Tuesday at this time is not helpful information because this is a really fluid situation. And so we don't keep track of who can come next week. We send it out and we ask basically every day on who can come and who's available. Before you decide to leave home and help Napa Cart, make sure that your own family and animals and everybody is safe and you're able to come. And then grab your to-go bag, or if you're coming from far away, grab whatever you're going to need, a pillow, toothbrush, and then go to the staging area that you've been directed to go to. So the next slide, yep. So the morning call out each morning, there will be a WhatsApp that goes out to the active ASAR team that says how many people are going to be needing and what they're going to need. So you're going to respond to that. And then if you decide that you want to send emails back or don't keep on the WhatsApp, you're likely to fall through the cracks. There's probably 50 people out there responding. So to try to look at, you know, private messages and voicemails and texts and stuff, it's a little bit hard. So your opportunity to help may fall through the cracks there. Toward the end of it, we may have too many people. So if you're put on standby, then you just wait at home and are waiting to be called. And then there's other times when we have not enough. And at that point, there'll be another notification that goes out to the broadcast list, which is everybody, to see if there's any availability out there to help. So if you're going to be part of the ASAR team, make sure that you are on the ASAR active list. So talk a little bit about the WhatsApp protocol. So everything that happens during the ASAR in the field and with the ASAR team is on the ASAR list, not on the broadcast list. They don't really need to know, nor do they probably want to know everything that we're doing out there. They have their own things to worry about. So try to keep all those responses short and on task. Trying to keep the attaboys and the copy and some of the other information that isn't really necessary for at that time, to do that separately. I'll make an example. So we did the fires and the two in 20 and the one in 19, and having the WhatsApp as a co-pilot, which is what I was doing, to have the WhatsApp and all of that coming in, it's hard to do when I'm trying to help have directions for him, trying to find if there's a safe place to turn around, trying to call the person whose pet we just visited. You know, there's a lot going on, looking at the map. So to have a lot of WhatsApps coming through and it's constantly dinging, it actually adds a lot of stress if it's not actually relevant, because I'm looking at it all the time going, oh, do they need me? Oh no, it's somebody saying thank you. You know, so it's all appreciated, but maybe there's a better time or a better place to do it, or you can take it off and do it as a direct chat to somebody. And that is the end of the WhatsApp. So, yep, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't have you switch it there. So there you go. And so I will pass it on to Alan Harrison.
Let's take a moment. Great job, you guys. We're doing really well on time. Are there any questions coming through the chat that we should address at this time? I can't see the chat as the screen sharer, but one of the chat monitors, or there's anything that we didn't address so far?
Yes, Claudia, there's a couple of questions. One is, can you please explain what pole line safety is?
Yes, so pole line safety usually comes up in all hazards training. So if you're going out into the animal search and rescue line of cart, you will have attended the all hazards training, and pole line safety is a discussion of how to be safe around power poles and also how to exit a vehicle if you have a power pole come down or if you have power lines cross your vehicle. And so it's one of the big risks we face in the field is being safe around damaged electrical infrastructure. So it's understanding what those risks are.
And this other question is the choice of green color a state or national mandate or chosen for a certain reason?
Excellent question. And we've been talking about this a bit. Regionally, Napa cart, Sonoma cart, and Solano cart are all going with green vests. The reason that we chose green is because green is the color of the CERT team vests. And that way law enforcement is seeing something that they recognize to be trained and organized. So green is regional for us. It is not a state mandated color yet.
And there was someone had asked the location of the 2021 volunteer manual on the website.
That might be a question for Megan. And if for some reason it's not on there, we can certainly get it uploaded.
Oh, okay, let's see. Well, actually, she also says, never mind, I found it.
Oh, even better yet. Okay. All right, if that's the majority of the questions, why don't we keep going, Alan? And I think you're up, huh?
I think so. Let me bring my screen up here. Okay, you want to go to the next screen?
You got it.
So arriving at the staging area, first thing you're going to do is sign in on the sign-in sheet. Make sure you sign in when you get there, sign out when you leave. So you'll sign in and you pick up all of our required paperwork. And next screen. While you're waiting for your assignments, you want to load your vehicle with the basic supplies. When you go out, like shelter in place or something, you might be going out with a whole list of days worth of chickens and cats to feed, but we also ask you to take some basic dog food and some other basic types of stuff with you, because quite often we will get something during the day, another request to go feed somebody's dog, And if you left this morning, you were gonna feed chickens and cats, and all you took was chicken and cat feed, and then we ask you to feed a dog in the middle of the day. So we want you to take a basic load of equipment. If you want to get your assignment, if you have any special equipment needed, you could pick that up after you get your assignment. Next slide. Okay, each person fills out, we have T cards. Right now, the green card is your personal card. Each person fills one of those out. And each driver fills out a blue T card for your vehicle. Do not hang out in the command center while you're waiting for your assignment. You'll get your paperwork done. You can turn in your paperwork. The way we've been running it, Cert's been running our comms, and you get the paperwork gets turned into them. You can also give it to one of the leadership that are working that day, and they will turn it into the Cert. But you want to make sure the command center is real busy during the morning, and you don't want to be in there just being a hindrance when they're trying to get everybody assigned. Next sheet, please. Forms used in animal search and rescue. 214, you must fill out the 214. That is a definite requirement. A 214 starts at your house. The moment you activate it, if you receive a phone call, the first thing going to be on your 214 is, at this time, I received a phone call activating me. You're going to get ready to go, and when you're ready to drive out, you're going to put on there, at this time, I departed this address, and this is my beginning mileage. When you arrive at the station, at the staging area, you're going to put in there the time that you arrived at the staging area, the address of the staging area, and your mileage. And every time you go somewhere, you fill out when you left, the mileage, when you arrived at the new location, the mileage, and what you did while you're there. So you're going to put in there, you arrived at the staging area, and then on your 214, you'll put in received job assignments, loaded equipment, departed staging area. Make sure you got your mileage. If you put your mileage when you came in, you don't need to put it down when you leave. But then when you arrive at your first job assignment, you're going to say, arrived at this address, did this work, this is my mileage when I arrived. You go to the next one, and each and every place you go, you write down the time you got there, where you're at, what you did, and your vehicle mileage. Fuel reimbursement. If the county does not supply fuel, you can fill out your mileage logs and possibly get a fuel reimbursement. I'm not guaranteeing that it'll happen. So far, the county has provided us with fuel. It was never there the first day of the incident. The third day or so in, we got fuel. And when they asked about fuel reimbursement, they said, well, we're not going to pay you for your fuel. We provided it. They provided gasoline. Those people with diesel trucks kind of got the short end of the stick because they didn't get reimbursed for their diesel fuel that this county didn't provide. In the future, if you've got a diesel vehicle, I recommend you fill out the mileage log, and we can always go to the county and request for a fuel reimbursement. Next slide.
Alan, one quick interjection. One very helpful tip on these busy days is every time you start your car, take a digital picture of your odometer and the address you're at, and it'll help you jog your memory too as you go. Realize that there will be houses where the addresses no longer exist, but a good trick is a picture of your digital picture of your odometer and the address you visited, and that can help you get all those details correct.
Yeah, that will help if you don't write it down. I highly suggest you just simply write it down each and every time you stop somewhere, so that way you're not trying to play catch up at the end of the day. This one here is my pet peeve, the vehicle forms, the vehicle inspection form. All vehicles that are going behind the evacuation line must be inspected prior to going out. The last thing we want to become is a hindrance because we're getting up on those mountains pulling horse trailers and come to find out, oops, I didn't have enough engine coolant and now my truck overheated or my vehicle oil was low and now I'm stuck out there. So this vehicle inspection is just a simple thing to have you check your oils, you know, check under the hood for your oil, your coolants, windshield washer fluid, your tires to make sure that they're in good shape, your lights are working, your windows are clean. So this is not difficult. We're not asking you to do major vehicle work, just basic vehicle checks. Certified haulers wanting to be eligible on the Evac call list this year. Fill this out and send it in. Put your phone number on this sign-in sheet and send it to me, allen@napacart.org. That's spelled ALLEN. My phone number is 650-219-5614. If you don't get a response from me about receiving it, then call me because sometimes the CART emails don't accept outside email addresses. So if you were on the Evac team last year and you do not send us in one of these with your phone number on it this year, we're not going to put you on the current this year's list. Next. Copy of the sign-in and 214. I already hammered those pretty hard. Make sure you sign in and sign out at the end of the day. Make sure you do your 214s. The sign-in sheet must match the time on your 214. So when you sign in, make sure that you put on your 214 signed in at this time. They have to match. Next. These are a copy of the T cards I told you about earlier. Green is for personnel and blue is for vehicles. These get filled out every day. They do not reuse them. So every day they get used and then they get filed and the next day you start over again. Next, please. Request for animal service form. We get our calls from dispatch and they come out on a request for animal service form. Get our job assignments. This will have the address, the name of the people, the address, the contact information, animals, the location of the animal. We get as much information as we can about where we're going, what we're doing. We put it on here. If you go out to take care of some animals or to pick some animals up and you come across some other animals, if the neighbor next door screams, you know, hey, help me with my animal, please. You want to call it into dispatch and let them know what you're doing. And then you need to make a new request for animal service form on this form, a new one. Do not add it to the form that you've already had. So if you go out to feed some animals on a shelter in place and you find out that the cat next door hasn't been being fed, then you can make sure you fill out a new one. Don't add it to the old one because the information you write on your form may not get sent in, may not get forwarded on all the other forms. There's half a dozen copies of these forms floating around. So you need to make sure you make a new one for every animal that you come across. Next slide. In place notice or door hangers. There's two different types. One is like a 8x11 sheet. The other one's a little thing that you hang on the door. They're both the same thing. This just you fill that out, the date when you were there, what notes you left, and your initials. This is to notify people that the animals that are there are being cared for, so that somebody doesn't come by and say, oh, this has been abandoned, let me pick it up. They know that if you leave this, they know that the animals are being cared for. So make sure you fill in the date and time of your visit, so that when someone does come by and see it, they see oh, this animal has been cared for. Next slide. And this is an animal care form. This one, pretty much a version of this is used in the shelters. We haven't used them out in the field yet, but it's basically the same thing as that door hanger that we have. We might end up using them in the future, and now we haven't. Next slide. Animal removal notice or door hanger. Like the shelter in place hanger, there's two different ones. You have the same information. One's made to hang on the door, the other one you post on a wall or on the fence or something, someplace prominent. And this would notify people that we came in and the animals were removed by Napa cart, and it leaves the information where they can get their animals. An example might be that the family evacuated and left their animals, and the wife had enough sense to call us, and we went out and picked it up. And then the husband, not knowing the wife called, goes running out there at night, sneaks in behind the lines, goes up to his place, finds his animals missing. If we don't have this out, he's going to assume they've been stolen. So that's why we want to make sure that we leave our removal notices and shelter in place notices. Next slide. And this is Shelterly. This is a new computer program that was designed to request animal service forms. It's not quite in full use with Napa cart yet. NAVDAG has it and is using it. It still has a few things it needs to be worked at. And the one major flaw it has is if you don't have good internet service, it doesn't work. So if you go out in the field and you pick up an animal, we will still use the request for animal service forms. And then if we have this program up and running, you'll bring your request for animal service form, turn it in, and someone in the office will get that information put onto the Shelterly program. Shelterly is a good program. It makes it real easy to track the animals and stuff, a lot easier than going through a stack of paperwork. Next slide. Okay, before you head out of the staging area, make sure you have and are wearing the right personnel protective equipment for what you are going to be doing. N95 masks are required when the air quality index is 150 or higher. And it seems like every time we're out there, we have to wear the N95 mask. You want to test your radios and walkie-talkies, make sure they're working. Just make sure you have all of the equipment you need before you leave. Do not use your GPS programs, whether it's your phone, your vehicle. When they close the roads down up there, your GPS is going to try to get you there and avoid the road closures. We can go through the road closures, but if you're following your GPS, you might end up going all the way to Middletown to go up to Lake Berryessa. We had that happen a couple of times already. So turn off your GPS. You will be given instructions how to get there. We have paper maps. Yeah, GPS just does not work when there's road closures and you get to go through the road closures. And next slide. And we're back to Michelle Badker.
We have one question in chat about the 214s. Do you want to answer that now or do you want to wait till the end?
Go ahead.
You have time.
Okay. They're asking if two people are working together, do you need to turn in one 214 as a unit or do they need to turn in separate 214s?
You can turn
If
in
you are working,
one 214 for the entire team is fine. As long as everyone's name is indicated on the 214, that works fine.
That was the only one that I saw really here. Okay, so I'm going to talk about when we're in the field a little bit. So this is basically any time after you've left the staging area, you are then considered in the field. So, you know, remember all this is happening during an emergency, right? So it's really important that everybody drives safely and cautiously all the time. If you're on those back roads and going up and down the hills, you know, 45 miles at the max, but if you're going up the hills, you know, you need to go really slow because there's emergency vehicles, there's water tanks, there's everything just flying up and down those back roads, and they are taking up the middle of the road. And when you're coming around a corner, that's it can get a bit scary. I will make an example again of last year. We were coming down a mountain, and the mountain was on the right side, and we were the lead, I think, and there were 3 behind us in the group. And a PG&E semi carrying a telephone pole came around the corner right at us. Like it was really very scary. If we would have been going any faster, it would have been bad for everybody. So you really just need to keep watching out for all the other emergency vehicles and any hazards, and go slow. Okay, turn that page.
Michelle, do you want to say anything about safe zones?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we are definitely behind the lines. So if there's a hot spot, so I was talking before too about like when you're out there and you're a co-pilot, you're looking for a place to turn around, you're looking for a safety zone, you're looking for, there's just a lot going on. So the driver and the co-pilot both have to know basically where they're at. And if there's a hot spot, then that you know where your safety zone is. Did you want to explain more what a safety zone is? Claudia,
No, I think that's great. Everyone on this that's going to go out in the field this year will have taken fire line safety and all hazards, and it's explained well in those training sections.
Yeah, you have to be really, really alert when you're out in the field. There's a lot to keep ourselves safe and everybody else safe and keep the roads clear. There's actually, it's a lot to keep up with. So
can I interject one additional comment in terms of hazards when you're in the field?
Yes, there's enough time, Jamie, if you keep it brief.
Okay, yeah, so really briefly, if you're in a burned out area and the wind starts picking up, get out. I don't know how much that's covered in all hazards, but if you see the wind start coming through those trees, get out of there.
Yeah, and that's a good time to pull over into a safe place and check in with comms as well, and indicate that you're not comfortable and get an update on what's going on. I think that's very good advice.
Yeah, one of the hazards, not even just when you're driving, is even when you're at a location and taking care of the animals, are to watch out for the trees that are burnt out. You know, you can be driving along and you can hear them cracking and falling. So you have to be really aware of what's going on, which is why we never go out alone. It's always 2 people, and you both need to be watching for, you know, everything. It's just, yeah, and you learn a lot of what these hazards are in some of the training, but it's really, you really need to take care of yourselves and be very safe out there. So.
Good,
Okay,
and I see some hands coming up. We're going to keep going, and then if we haven't answered the questions through the presentation, if you could kindly put them in chat, that would be lovely.
Okay. So the other thing is that you're going out as a team, and it's really important to go out as a team. A lot of times it's just 2 people, but that's probably more toward the end of the event than in the beginning of the event. So you always want to stay together. Before you leave the staging area, you exchange your contact information, and you also exchange your travel plan on how you intend to get there. So if you do happen to miss somebody at the stoplight, the person that's in the lead can pull over, and they know that they are pulling over on the road, that these people are supposed to be coming right behind them. So if you miss somebody and you're not able to stop and or not able to get everybody through the traffic light or whatever the hazard is or obstacle, then as soon as possible, everybody pulls over and waits for the whole team to reunite, and then you leave again. And then you never go faster than the slowest vehicle that's in your team, whether that's somebody carrying water or somebody carrying the horses or whatever it would be. You always go, just because if you're carrying water and the horses, going up and down, you're going to go pretty slow. So you always stick together as a team. It's very important. All right. So once you get to where you're going, you're going to always park facing out, not just the horse trailer, if that's what you're with, but the whole entire team that's together all need to pull in and get into a direction that's facing for them to have to be able to go out. Then as a team, you're going to survey the situation. You look at your RAFS form. That's always hard to say. You look at that form and you figure out what animals you're supposed to be taking care of there. You come up with a plan. And then if there's 4 of you, 2 go out into one area, 2 go out into the other. If there's 3 of you, then all 3 of you stick together and you do the different jobs that are in that location together as a team. And then, of course, you'll be behind your shelter in place or your evacuation notice. But no one ever goes alone. So the next one. So when you're out in the field, part of the responsibility of going out there and taking care of these animals, especially during the shelter in place piece, is that you're going to call the owners after you leave their location. Last year, I think we tried to do it before and after. It's been changed, I believe, for this next year that we are going to have them all called prior to prior to assignments being given. So you won't have to wait around and call, but you will call all of them afterwards. It's a courtesy. They want to know how their animals are doing. And when you talk to them, the people are so happy. They're just like, you're a lifeline to their babies. And you're also like one of the only normal things that they can actually, they're counting on you to take care of their animals. And that's one of the things that they can hold on at that point. So it's really important. If you have a nice picture that you can send them or talk to them about it, try to make it close up, follow the guidelines, and then, that really makes them happy and they feel really good about it. Ellen touched on this a little bit. So you're going to stick with your assignments. Whatever you're given, that's where you're going to go. If anything happens while you're out there, oh no, wait, that's the next slide. I'm jumping ahead. So when you're out there, then dispatch is going to be called and notified it when you leave and when you arrive at each location. And this is not done on WhatsApp. This is done through the communications. So right now we're using Cert for that. In the future, it may be our own, depending on it. But whoever your communication team is that's going out with you into the field, they are the ones that are going to be contacting dispatch. So trying to streamline our communication. Not everybody needs to know everything. So by streaming that line, we'll be a little bit clearer and have a lot less static on the lines in general, the communication lines. So comms would also, if you're going to divert and do anything different, they would be the ones that would be notifying them of that. So again, just can't stress it enough. Everybody has to stick together. You complete your assignments together. If you've got a team of 4 vehicles out there and somebody needs to leave for whatever reason, the whole entire team then leaves. They call comms, communicates with dispatch, and notifies that everybody is coming back in for whatever that reason would be. But you don't go out with 4 vehicles and come back with 3. That causes, especially CERT, oh man, that just causes them a heart attack. They do not like that. So best to always stay on their good side. And then, yeah, so no breaking and entering. This came up last year for us. We were told that there was going to be a key underneath the mat. And if it wasn't, go ahead and break in the back door. Thankfully, there was a key underneath the mat and we didn't have to do that. But people want you to do whatever you can to get their animals out. And as Napa CART, that's not within our jurisdiction. I understand everybody wants to do everything they can to get that animal out, but we always have to remember that what we're doing is for the greater good. And so if we screw up and do a breaking and entering and are called out on that, then, you know, maybe Napa cart's not allowed at all. So we really need to think about the decisions that we make that we're out there and how everything that we do really does affect the greater good of everybody. So even though it would be unfortunate to leave an animal behind, it sometimes happens. All right, next one. So if you're out in the field and somebody flags you down or whatever, and they're saying that Alan touched on this, there's a cat next door or somebody left their pigs back there and nobody reported them. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to have your communications, notify CERT and the ASAR leaders and let them know what the situation is. And then you are going to have to fill out a new RFAS form. And if you don't have one with you, which you should, write it all down on a piece of paper as soon as you get back to the staging area at the end of the day, put it on a new form. Do not duplicate any animals that were not already on that original form. Like Alan said, there's lots of papers and lots of copies of this stuff. Stuff does not get, it's not possible to transfer it from one piece of paper to the other for all of the copies that are out there. So always create a new request form and make sure you have the address, and then we'll make sure that it gets on the list so it's taken care of every day or whatever the need would be if it needs to be brought in. But so always carry, as Alan said, your extra forms.
Michelle, I'm going to just add to that, for those of you who have not yet been out in the field, there are beautiful Go kits for every team. And in those Go kits are a binder of extra forms, maps, everything you could imagine that you might need out there are part of the kits that go out with each team. So you should have a stocked kit, but that's one of the things that you can do if you're waiting for an assignment, is to go through your kit and just make sure that you have all the forms you need.
So once you're done with all your assignments that are out there, then you're going to start heading back to the staging center. So as I mentioned before, the leaving and departing of, the arriving and the departing of every location is notified to the dispatch by the communications person. This is not a WhatsApp communication, and it doesn't need to go to everybody. Only the dispatch needs to know who's coming and who's going and where they're at. So for the shelter in place animals, if they are need to be taken care of again in 2 days or 3 days, you're going to write on your form that it's continuing care, so that they can get on the next rotation for when they go out. And bring animals. So if you're out there and an animal needs to come in, you need to bring in somebody's cat, then make sure that you have all that paperwork, and then communications again, not WhatsApp, will notify the shelter of what animals are coming in and how many, and then you'll be told on where to take them, whether it's the large animal shelter or the small animal shelter, or which large animal shelter. All right. So when you get back, you're going to deliver your animals and unload them wherever you've been directed to, and make sure that all the paperwork that is with that animal stays with that animal. Because otherwise that's how animals we end up not knowing where they go. And I don't think we've ever had a problem with any of that, but we really need to be diligent about making sure that all the paperwork sticks with the animal through the entire process. So after you get back and you've dropped off your animal, then you want to basically look at everything that you've used that day in inventory, any supplies, whether you use tape and put a hole in your glove or whatever it is, take notice of all that stuff and resupply yourself with whatever you're going to need. And if it was the last one that you have or whatever, then talk to the leader, ASAR leader, about ordering more, and then clean and disinfect your trailer as needed if you had the unfortunate of hauling a sick animal. Right. And then before you go home, I think this is one of the key things, is that before you go home, you don't just drop the animals off and leave. It is really important to do a debrief with dispatch, the ASAR leader, and your teammates. The teammates may, before you turn in all of the forms for the end of the day, the teammate that went to take care of the chickens may have different notes than the person that went to take care of the horses, the 2 people that went one area and the 2 people that went the other way. So make sure that all of your notes are consistent and that that they all say the same thing. Talk to the leaders if there was anything out there, and then definitely talk to dispatch. This is how communication is goes on then to the next crew that comes through, which is usually the next day. But if you don't do a debrief and hand over and communicate all the necessary information, then the next crew that's coming through is not going to know what's going on. So sometimes over communication in this area is better. Sign out and make sure that your sign out time matches your 214 and that your 214 has its mileage on it.
Beautiful. And then Michelle, one other thing, that one of the many awesome components of Shelterly, which NAVDAG has very generously allowed us to beta test with them, is that it does have an area for debriefs to be uploaded to the RFA so that the following day, the person coming behind you or at the next visit will have the benefit of your debrief notes. So for example, if you can explain that the chicken coop is actually a quarter of a mile up and around the hill, and that the dog there barks but doesn't bite, those notes will be added in. And that was one of the hard things about the system we had this year, was trying to get that relevant information and the volunteer experience handed down to the next person arriving. So Shelterly will help us to do a better job by taking that debrief information and getting it passed along.
So last year when we were out, if we didn't know what was going on, or we had heard something about the chicken coop being not where it was supposed to be, because everybody talks, then we would reach out to whoever had that. We'd figure out who had it yesterday and reach out to them and ask them the question. So
Perfect.
it'll be great if Shelterly covers all of that.
That's a good plan.
So, and then when you get home at the end of the day, shower and change your clothes before handling any of your loved ones or your 4-legged or 2-legged. You've been touching a lot of different things, so try to clean up before you do that. But you need to keep your WhatsApp on. Again, that is the main communication on when people are needed and where they're going to be needed and how many people are going to be needed. Trailers, trucks, whatever it would be. So always keep that on with the notification turned on so you hear it when it comes through. And these events go on for, it seems like an eternity when you're living them. So if you're there several days in a row, make sure you take some time off to recoup. Some people don't need to do it as often as others. I need to recoup faster than my partner needs to recoup. So you're not very good out there if you're not taking care of yourself. So make sure that you take the time that you need to rest. Don't try to be a hero to be there for all 21 days of it or 14 days or whatever. So be sure to rest if you need it. And that's the end of mine.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. We're still doing really well on time. Anything in the chat question-wise that we should address now before we start with Jen? If that's a no, then we can get started with Jen.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. And all safety. Can you hear me okay, guys?
Yes,
Alright.
we,
Hold on,
Okay.
Jen. Well, hold on one sec. Alan, are there a few questions we should address?
there was a couple of things. Someone was asking about how often you have to be a sworn disaster service worker. So do you want to grab that?
Yes. So for Napa CART, if you've completed all of the training that was discussed in the beginning of this slideshow, meaning you've done your Cert Training, your ICS 100 and 200, you've completed your annual volunteer and that training, then you're sworn in as a Napa CART disaster service worker. If you want to do animal search and rescue, in addition, every year you have to take fire line safety and all hazards. It's not that you have to be sworn in again. Once you're sworn in, you're sworn in. It's that you have to stay current on those areas of training that affect your safety. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, but also, if you don't meet all those requirements, you can come to an event and be sworn in for that event only, and work that event.
Yes, with
But then you have to get,
yep, with an experienced person, we would pair you up, and then the following year, when you've completed the required training, you would be sworn in as Napa CART. And it doesn't require an annual re-swear-in. Once you are sworn in for Napa CART, you're sworn in. You can lose your swear-in credential or your disaster service worker credential if you are not following the policies of Napa CART, but that would be an isolated incident.
okay, and there was a question that when we're swearing in for Napa CART, that's done. We make arrangements and we'll put out the date and time that it's happening. That's not something that we have a standard schedule for. And there's a gentleman, Paul, who has his hand up. Paul, can you write your question into the chat, please?
We do currently have, I believe, 12 people who are now eligible to be sworn in. So we are working with Napa County to arrange a swear-in date, and we will reach out to those of you who have met those training qualifications and give you some options for swear-in.
There is also a question on here about filling out the forms, the RFAS forms. So it does not have to be one form per animal. It is like if you have 30 chickens, you don't need to have 30 forms. You have one form that says 30 chickens. Same with the goats. If you have a herd of goats, it's, one herd of whatever, 5. You don't need 5 different forms for all that. From my experience, I think it was basically just one form per stop. So if you stopped at somebody and they had chicken and horses, they were all in the same form. It said, 15 chickens. And then if it's the horses and it's not like 20 of them, then you would have the horses written out individually or the dogs. But when it comes to herd animals like the goats and the chicken or flock animals, you just
That's correct. And then Shelterly does a beautiful job of then identifying each animal, because if they're in shelter in place and in the shelters, it is a good idea to have each animal listed. That way, if a particular animal is having a problem and needs additional attention, there's an easy way to indicate that. So you're absolutely correct, Michelle. And yet once they go into Shelterly, on the administrative side of that, they'll each be given their own description and space on the RFAS.
Does that apply for the birds and flocks too on Shelterly?
If they're being admitted into a shelter, yes.
Oh,
If they're in shelter in place, that can vary case by case, and that would become an issue if one animal is not looking good or has an issue. Then it's going to be important to be able to distinguish that herd animal from another animal.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? We'll go ahead and we'll move on to Jen Borgen, our safety officer. Go ahead, Jen.
All right, again, thank you folks for being here this evening, and let's dig in here to all things safety. Well, you're probably thinking, really, you're going to open with that? Well, yeah, because this is actually something you need to know about. If you think about it, our county and our neighboring counties have a lot of remote areas, and there's some, well, unique people living out there. And this actually happened to me last season. I had somebody come out of a place at the end of a long driveway, kind of like that old cartoon character, Yosemite Sam, and it caught me by surprise. So if this does happen to you, don't go, running and screaming down the hill. That's not what we're looking for. First thing to think about is, okay, you're in a pretty little green vest and probably have a ball cap on that says Napa CART and things like that. So be sure to identify yourself calmly. Say, hey, we're from Napa CART, the Community Animal Response Team. They probably don't know what a CART is. We are here to help so-and-so's animals. And we would like your permission to enter the property. And if they're having none of it, that's it. That's the end of the story. And that's their place and it's their property. And as hard as it is for us to back away because their neighbor has some animals that they requested help for, we cannot put ourselves in danger, or certainly it is unwise to escalate a situation. So in that case, you just apologize profusely and say, I am so sorry if we made you uncomfortable, and we'll just back away here slowly. Words to that effect. But do be aware that there's folks out there and your best strategy is sheer diplomacy and common sense. But when it comes right down to it, if it feels kind of funky, just back away. And that brings us to the next slide, please, about the whole general principles of safety. Okay, and we've been talking about this a lot tonight. If it feels unsafe, I'm going to say a different plan here. But I want you to remember back, well, I think it was slide number 7 there, way back when this evening, we talked about the safety algorithm. What's that? Let's see, who comes first? You do, right? And then your team members come after you even. Oh, wait, what about the animals? They're actually last. And that is really, really hard to deal with because we're there for them, right? We're there for the animals. Just think of it this way. We don't have a lot of time to deal with this, but if you remember it this way, that if you take yourself out, you have now become a liability and the team is less likely to succeed. If a team member takes themselves out, or you put a team member in an unsafe situation, you have pretty much guaranteed that that mission will fail. So if you want to have a chance of that mission to succeed, you must maintain that little hierarchy of actions, your safety, your teammates, and the animals. It does bear repeating. So here's another one. Maintain situational awareness. Okay, so that's being aware of your situation, right? Sounds kind of simple, like what's happening around you? Sure, yeah, it is. But you need to know that there are volumes written about situational awareness. It's actually a big deal. Big academic mucky mucks study this stuff for a living. And think about it in terms of police department, fire departments, the military, emergency medical. These folks need to maintain situational awareness. And now that you're putting yourself in a situation like this, you do too. But so let's figure out what it actually means instead of just, knowing it as a word. So I'm going to throw a little better definition at you. And I'm going to say it slowly enough for you to be able to kind of absorb the meaning of this. So situational awareness is how you perceive events and elements around you and how you project those observations on the present and your immediate and near-term future. Oh, I see. So I'm supposed to be constantly looking around, listening, observing everything there is to observe. And it's like a continuous feedback loop. Okay, so here's the thing. This takes practice. It's practice. But I assure you that you can practice it in your regular, normal life without making yourself into like a obsessive compulsive maniac here. But it's actually a great life skill to have. Try practicing situational awareness so that you've got that in your back pocket when you deploy. It's actually really important. And you can think about that type of elements that you're going to be looking for, right? Objective hazards in the environment, changing fire situation, the horse is getting more nervous, the owner's getting more nervous, somebody gets hurt. There's a million things that can happen and it's going to keep changing, keep changing, keep changing. So ideally, all persons should be maintaining situational awareness, but you should also know that whoever's assigned to be the safety officer for that team should definitely be practicing situational awareness. So a little slightly unrelated point here is our job is to evacuate and shelter in place, but we can't train people's animals for them. We can't take the time to do it, right? And so there's some animals that we just are not going to be able to load up. Maybe by maintaining our situational awareness, we realize that this animal who has never been handled before is not going to get in the box. So we give it our best shot and we use what skills and talents that we may have, but at some point you got to call it off, and that's not easy. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just some general field safety stuff. I want you to know that we've got a pretty nifty little heat illness video that we should be putting up soon on the website here. That's actually designed for Napa CART members for your use and information in the field. So I don't have the time to go into the 3 types of heat illness and how to avoid it in this slide, but I would point you to that future program on our website, hopefully, and make sure that you are well aware of it, because that is also a big, huge deal, both for yourself and for your teammates. As far as the general safety tips, we've been hearing about lifting with our legs for our entire lives. We've been hearing about how we should plan and work together and communicate. That's something that is a level of teamwork that you usually develop in the field as you go. But taking the time to identify exit and escape routes, I'm going to hit just a couple more slides down. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so ideally, we're going to have all these roles for the different team members here. A comms person is going to handle the radio and dispatch and WhatsApp and the phones and, you know, whatever else you have available to you out there. And a person who is assigned to be the lookout is kind of like looking at general environmental safety. Remember that bit about looking for safety zones? As you're driving up Spring Mountain, you want to be on swivel for vineyards that you can get to the middle of. They are excellent safety zones. So be aware of things like that. And it's really hard to, you know, say this in a 30-second slide, but it bears an entirely, you know, new training in and of itself, but we'll do our best to share the information with you. You want to be watching for active fire, of course, and someone else mentioned weather changes like wind. That's a biggie, changing wind conditions. And then of course, changing road conditions. Oops, the tree fell. I sure hope I thought about another way in and out of here. And incidentally, that's obviously stuff that you want to check before you go. How many routes in, how many routes out? If there's only one, you better think long and hard about whether or not the conditions are stable enough for you to even make that approach. So last year we had the CERT person sort of handle the safety role along with the comms, and it did work well with one caveat, and that is that many of the CERT people don't have the animal experience and aren't, you know, animal handlers, especially for large animals. So they might not really pick up on a problem that's imminent or about to happen. So if you're going to have someone be a safety officer, it should actually also be a person who knows what they're looking for, knows when something is about to go wrong. If you follow my drift on that, it's very, very important that you understand the risks. And it's very, very, very easy for us to get tunnel vision whenever we're managing an animal. All right, next slide, please. All right, so LCES, I can't remember an acronym to save my life, but the advice here is kind of common sense, and the fire departments use this. So LCES stands for lookout. Okay, we just talked about that. Wind, weather, animals starting to get a little too excited, owners getting too excited. What about bystanders? There can be all kinds of things like that. The communications, there's so much communication going on that it really does take one person's full attention. It's a huge job. The escape routes we talked about, and safety zones we talked about. And again, I'm going to drive home that point about vineyards. Hey, it's Napa, right? There's vineyards everywhere. And so I submit to you that that is your #1 safety zone. Next slide, please.
Technical difficulties. Oh, there we go. Okay, got it.
Thank you. Evac Safety. All right. Well, again, this is another one that deserves an entire training program all to itself. And for those of you who are perhaps new to this, fear not, we will cover much more about this. This isn't your only shot at it. And for those of you who have been around the block with Evac once or twice, I'm sure you'll recognize some of this information. So the important part here is about making a plan with your team. You don't want to just charge in. As much as we all feel the need to do that, obviously we know better now. So you want to huddle with your team before you ever enter the gate or even really before you leave for that particular mission, because you should be looking at fire maps. You should be doing all these things to make your plan. And once you've made that plan, make sure that you make another and another and another. And you might not be able to make plan B, C, and D until you are actually at the site of the evacuation. So be aware of that. Your plan might change a half a dozen times before you get the job done, and that's okay. All right, so making sure everybody knows their role is also pretty critical. We know that. If you don't know what you're supposed to be doing as a special assignment, you're not going to be very good at it. All right, and we talked very briefly about situational awareness, but also what goes right along with that is being ready to stop. The safety officer, whoever that has that assignment, has the absolute right to put a stop to the meeting if they to the mission if they see that something's going on that's going to result in somebody getting hurt or the mission's going to fail. But anyone can fulfill that role. If you see something that you don't like and you're like, I don't know if I can do this, I'm not comfortable with this, that's it. The team stops. Back off, regroup. If you can find a plan B, C, or D, great. If not, then the mission stops. And remember about calling for assistance too. That first slide with the, what do we call them? Interesting folks living out in the remote areas. Well, what happens if they don't cotton up to your explanation as to why you're there? If things kind of look dicey, make sure that your communications person or anyone really thinks, gee, maybe I better get on that ham radio or WhatsApp or whatever the heck I've got and call 911 if you need it, or if somebody gets hurt, one of you has a medical emergency, etc. Very important. I think this is the last slide coming up there, Claudia. Thank you. Yep, it is. All right, so this is kind of a ticklish problem here. Loading, well, let's just say we're going to load horses in a big public space, maybe not the supermarket parking lot, but sometimes you're in a place where there's a whole lot of people or even just the owner. So here's the thing. You're probably going to figure out after you've done just a couple of calls, which of the team members is probably the best qualified and the most talented at being in charge. Okay, somebody has to come across as being in charge. Yes, you're all in a team, but one person should control that scene. Let's take a for instance here where you've got an animal that maybe has never been handled before. The owner's freaking out. It's a mandatory event. And you've got a pretty high energy situation here. Well, we all know that high energy and animals just don't go together. So somebody has to take charge and keep the scene quiet, have as few people as you can possibly have actually handling the animal. If you can use other people to keep bystanders away, have somebody sequester the owner, even if you have to talk to them about the weather, for crying out loud, get that owner away from that scene if they're too excitable. On the other hand, if that owner is helpful and calm, sure, if they want to load their own animal, they're the best person to do it because the owner, the animal knows them. So you'll make all those decisions on the scene, but I want you to remember that somebody has got to take control from Napa CART. Somebody has got to stay professional, keep it calm, and keep it quiet. I imagine that some of these things probably raised a few questions or sea stories from people who have actually had deployments. So I'll go ahead and close out this section with that since we're approaching the 8 o'clock hour.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. And for those of you that are new to Napa CART, usually at the staging center, we're going to assign the lead. Usually you're going to know who the lead is. And ultimately, if things start to unravel a bit, the lead will have had enough experience. That's how they get to be in that lead position, where they can make some decisions about what plan B or plan C is going to be. So it'd be a rare situation where as a team member, you don't have a designated lead. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Nancy.
Okay, so we're running out of time. I just want to go over when an animal won't cooperate, when you realize it's not loading. Okay, so we have this thing called the 5-minute rule, which most of us understand is a rule of thumb. It just means don't waste all your time on one difficult animal if you can be helping more animals. Generally, the clock is not ticking. If it is, that's a different matter. But the important thing, and I've heard that some people felt a little pressured by this 5-minute rule. So don't feel rushed, stay calm and focused, give each animal your best effort. And if it doesn't load, we go on to the next slide. Okay, sometimes you have to just leave them because they won't load. So what do? First of all, if it's a herd animal, such as any of the equine species, horse, mule, donkey, whatever, possibly some of the others, I don't know, goats, I don't know. Don't leave one by itself, especially horses will panic. They are very into their herd mates. You can't just leave one alone. So even though its buddy was good and did load, you really got to leave it behind. So of course, this won't apply to a dog or a cat, just the herd type animals. Okay, next. So what you need to do is you want to look around and find the safest place you can. That may be if the property has a little fenced riding arena, that is ideal because sand doesn't burn. If there's a dry lot where the horses have grazed it down to nothing, that's also excellent. Ideally, they're going to have metal fences because they don't burn. Vinyl melts and wood burns. Do the best you can. Also, if it is a situation with a barn with individual stalls, be sure to lock those things because horses have been known to run back into a burning building because their stall is their safe spot. And it sounds crazy, but there's lots of cases on record where that happened. Be sure to take off anything that might burn or melt. If they're wearing a blanket, a slinky, a halter, a fly mask, take it off because we don't want to add burns that they don't need. If it is possible to water down the area, if there's a hose, if there's a sprinkler, just turn it on. Let the owner worry about the water bill. They will thank you. And leave 3 days of food and water if it is available, and immediately notify or have your comms person notify dispatch that you're having to leave this animal behind. And then you leave and you cross your fingers and you hope it all turns out okay. And a lot of times it does. Same deal with cats. We ended up caring for a lot of cats in the glass fire, I believe, because they're, if they're an indoor-outdoor cat and they're outdoors at the time, you can't find them. Or maybe they're sort of, a barn kitty and they're not catchable. So the same with them is you leave food and water and you let dispatch know that they need to reschedule a recheck as soon as the area is safe to enter again. And let's see, what have we got after that? Okay, so we're going to skip all this. This was optional, but just go down to the last slide. So actually, maybe the second to last, we do want to tell people, about the different videos and the different online training materials that we have. Just explore our website. Most of it is on the video page, even if it is a PDF. And last but not least, thanks everybody.
All right, I'm gonna end the
slide.
share there. So as you can all see, we are in amazing hands. We've got this very experienced, well-oiled group of leaders here that we all learn together every year. And I believe that we get more and more prepared. And then Mother Nature just challenges us each year. And so we continue to learn together. One of the big things about search and rescue work is that you have to be resilient. You have to be resourceful. If you follow these basic ideas and concepts that we put out in front of you today. You'll find that you're working with some amazing people who all have the same goal, which is to be safe out there and get animals what they need. Many of you, when you registered for this training tonight, supplied a phone number, and Megan has created a 2021 ASAR list. And so some of you have been receiving notifications. Realize that that list will be checked against people who submit their vehicle inspection forms, meaning part of being sent out into the field is the requirement is that you have completed an inspection of the vehicle that you would be using to go out in the field, and that has to be emailed to Alan. So you're currently on the ASAR list, and again, we will double check that against emails coming in. So try and do that as soon as you can, and that way Alan can forward that information to Megan, and Megan can control who is on our call out list. Any questions? We've gone a little over time, so if you need to leave, feel free to go. We've got you captured for this training. And again, we thank you for putting in the time. And then we can take a few moments to address any questions for those of you who want to hang out or who have additional questions. Nick?
I did see a question of, do you really mean leave 3 days worth of food for a horse? The only food you're going to leave is hay, grass hay. You're not going to leave them equine senior or grain or whatever supplements, you know, a horse might have, because that would obviously make them quite ill or possibly kill them. But grass hay, yeah, you know, leave actually, they'll probably all eat it the first day, but you can't just let them sit there with no food and water for 3 days.
Yes, and water.
Is that right?
Yes, water is the most important thing. It's a catch-22. If you put 3 days worth of food in there, they're likely to eat the 3 days worth of food. And yet in these incidents, as many of you know, it can take 7 to 10 days for us to get to some of these areas. So here's what I would say. Depending on the nature of the incident, if you're coming in after the fire, that's a no-brainer. You don't need to put 3 days of food ahead. If you were sent out to evacuate and you cannot get those animals out, then I do think it's appropriate to throw a heavy feeding and then leave the rest of the hay adjacent to the pen, if that makes sense. That can be case by case. If you're not sure what to do, if there's a big herd, you can always radio that in. The recommendation, the published recommendation, is to leave 3 days of food, but as you can imagine, that could get some horses into trouble. So if you're not sure what to do, that would be a question for your leader under the circumstances of that fire. Other questions? Megan, have you sent that WhatsApp out to everybody?
Well, I did. So if somebody, there were a couple people that when I was setting it up, didn't pop up in WhatsApp. And so I think a couple of reasons that could be. One, maybe I don't have your number correct in our system. So maybe send me an email at info@NapaCart, just so I can verify your phone number. And then the other thought might be, if you have WhatsApp on your phone, but maybe it needs an update or something, it wasn't pulling you up on my side. So check your WhatsApp, see if it needs an update. But feel free to email me if we can't figure it out.
One thing to realize about WhatsApp, many of you may be aware that there have been some safety concerns about privacy on WhatsApp. And we are aware of that. And we have looked at the other platforms, and actually it does appear that WhatsApp still has some of the more stringent safety aspects in place, yet their disclaimer when you go to re-up is going to ask you to let you know that information that you broadcast across WhatsApp is not potentially secure. So our policy with WhatsApp is the only thing that we're putting out on WhatsApp are communications amongst our group. We're trying not to share any sensitive data on WhatsApp if we can help it. Now, that being said, in the 2017 fires and in the 2020 fires, there were multiple instances where WhatsApp was the only thing working. Even the ham radios were not functioning in some of the areas that we went. And in those cases, we did transmit an RFAS across WhatsApp, but we tried to do that from one Napa cart dispatcher to one lead so that we weren't putting it out over the entire broadcast. So when we do have to use WhatsApp to transmit something like an address, we try and just go ahead and tune that down to one-to-one and not put it out as a broadcast, if that makes sense. Any questions about that? Someone asked if we'd considered Zello. I can tell you that I have no personal experience with Zillow, but I'm not convinced that Zillow will hold up the way WhatsApp has. All right. Any other questions?
Sorry, I got one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was, someone was asking about vehicle inspections. So I would like to have, if you have a truck and trailer and you want to be put on the evacuation list, send me an inspection with the truck and trailer information and your phone number. Once we are done evacuating and we start taking care of shelter in place, all vehicles that are going to go behind the evacuation line, even if it's just your little Toyota Prius, whatever, any vehicle that's going behind the evacuation line has to go through an inspection. We just want to make sure that you don't go out there and have vehicle problems that could have been solved by, putting engine oil in your engine before you left. So that's it. To get on the evacuation list, email me your form with your phone number. Once we get into shelter in place, you will have to do a vehicle inspection, but it's not critical to get them emailed right away. We'll have time once the event happens to start doing, you can inspect your vehicles and bring the form in and stuff. So.
And that's Alan,
And,
Alan at napacart.org is where you're going to email those two.
It has
and the form,
ALLN.
yeah, the form was attached to the notice for this meeting. Someone asked where you get that form. Go back and look at your original notice. It should have been attached to the bottom. But if not, you can write to any of us and we can send it to you. But it should be attached already.
Info
Once again, if you need it emailed to you, send me an email and I will send it to you.
Beautiful. Info at Napacart is always a nice default. If you forget somebody's first name, then info at will get you where you need to be. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it. I don't have any additional notes here. One thing for you all to be aware of is that that we are bringing Shelterly on board, and we didn't talk much about Shelterly tonight, but we do have an excellent training video that NAVDAG released that goes through each component of Shelterly, and I encourage those of you that want to be actively involved to start learning your way around it. We are going to get multiple videos posted within the next week or so. And so check back in, and when we follow up after this training, we'll give you a little nudge to go to the training area and start looking at some of these videos that might help you be a little bit more prepared for when the time comes. So with that being said, thank you again. It's just amazing to see the dedication out there. I see a lot of familiar faces, and as frightening as this fire season is, I'm very comforted to know that all of you are out there and that you want to help us all with the animals. It's really inspiring. So thank you, and have a wonderful evening. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.